Welcome to This Is Money podcast. I'm Georgie Frost, and joining me and editor Simon Lambert today is deputy editor Helen Crane. And coming up, he wouldn't dare, would he? Calls for the Chancellor to cap the total amount we can save tax-free in ISAs at 100 grand. The current system benefits the rich, say the Resolution Foundation, and changing it could save the government $1 billion a year. But will Mr Hunt heed the calls? Also today, is this the best Amex and Avios deal ever? British Airways launches a new credit card that gives you 8 free flights just for signing up. So what's the catch? Crane is back on the case this week. I'm afraid it's not a happy tale, but can our Helen help? Plus, you really do love these questions, so we deliver. How much money does putting on a jumper really save on your energy bills? We put it to the thermometer test. And forget Harry and Meghan. The Bank of Dave film is out on Netflix. Our Simon has an exclusive with the man himself. Dave, that is, not Harry. Don't forget, you can stay up to date with all the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app.
Market updates and conversations around the financial world don't have to be boring. The Digest and Invest podcast by eToro is a great way to tune into what's happening in a fun and easily digestible format. Discover the Digest and Invest podcast at etoro.com/academy/podcasts.
But first, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is being urged to dramatically cut what we can hold in tax-free ISAs. A report by think tank the Resolution Foundation estimates the government could raise around $1 billion a year in taxes by capping the total amount at £100,000. It said the policy could direct more funding towards helping families who have no savings at all, rather than continuing to benefit rich individuals via tax breaks. It's bold. It's bound to really annoy about 1.5 million who have over 100 grand saved in ISAs. But, Simon and Helen, will it happen? Helen, just a quick one. ISAs 101. What's so good about them? What are the current rules?
The good thing about ISAs is that the money you save in them is tax-free. So at the minute, you can save or invest, if it's a stocks and shares ISA, up to £20,000 a year into your ISA. But there is no overall cap on how much you can accumulate in ISAs over your lifetime. So technically, you could save £20,000 a year every year into your ISA and you wouldn't have to pay tax. On the flip side, if you put that money into a regular savings account, you would have to pay tax on the interest that you made. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, any interest over £1,000 you pay tax on, that's cut down to £500. If you're a high rate taxpayer, or if you're an additional rate taxpayer, you don't get any allowance. So basically a good tax-free way to save a fairly decent amount of money.
It is indeed. Simon, I assume here all of us have got ISAs. Is that about right? Everyone can put their hand up on this one. Yep, there's a nod. Nod from Helen, nod from Simon, nod from me. Okay, so we all rather like them. Resolution Foundation, what are they suggesting here?
They are suggesting that the amount that people should be able to save or invest into an ISA should be capped at £100,000. The exact sentence in the Resolution Foundation report that was put out. Now, this is a Resolution Foundation report called ISA Baby, I should mention. Long-term podcast listeners might recognise that. It's a phrase that has been used by our former deputy editor, Lee Boyce, on a number of occasions, getting excited about ISAs. I think it was then in a Halifax or something advert as well, but it's now here. But we know where that's come from. It said, to quote, "The Chancellor should also cut waste by capping the total amount of ISAs savings that are tax-free at £100,000, reflecting the very poor use of resources involved in offering tax relief to 1.5 million people with over £100,000 of savings in ISAs alone. This policy might raise around £1 billion per year by the end of 2023-24 and allow scarce resources to be focused on the around 750,000 families with no savings at all." Wow. Now, in the sort of bump that was put out with this report, the press release, to give it the technical term, this paragraph was buried right down the bottom of the press release. It was the one that I spotted when I was reading it on Monday morning, and then spoke to Ed Magnus, our savings guru, and said, "Ed, we should do a story on this." And that's the angle. because that would be some real turnaround doing this. We talk about ISA millionaires. We promote this as a great thing. The ISA millionaire, like there's some ISA millionaires out there. They've saved and invested so hard and made their gains, and there's something that we can look up to and we can all aspire to. No. We need to attack that. We need to slash it by 10, £100,000 and you're out, sunshine. No more for you. That would be a serious turnaround, seriously unpopular. Would be something that actually, probably like inheritance tax, would affect only a relatively small number of people, 1.5 million here. But you've got to remember that £100,000 now ain't what £100,000 used to be when the ISA was started up. I mean, so should you take the £100,000 from when the ISA was started up and index link it? I don't know. What I do know is that this was by far and away the most read story on the site this week. And this was by far and away the most unpopular idea that I've seen floated this week, even managing to top Jeremy Hunt and his coffee cup inflation explanation. Genuinely can't see the chance of doing this. And there's a number of reasons why. You can look at any scenario involving wealth and you can say that is unfair, because there are always people who have more money than other people. And if you take the people at the top and the people at the bottom, it always looks unfair. Is it fair that you have a millionaire and you have someone struggling to get by and going to a food bank? No, not really. But you do have to allow for the fact that there will always be inequality. You can try to minimize that inequality as much as possible. You can try to pull all the levers you can so that people have a really good basic standard of living, that there's a safety net to catch them when they fall, that there are incentives to try and get them to save. But does that mean that you shouldn't also offer incentives to those at the upper end of the scale who, let's face it, if you've managed to get £100,000 into an ISA or hundreds of thousands of pounds into an ISA, if you're an ISA millionaire, there is a very, very strong chance that you will have paid an awful lot of tax on the way to doing it. Because yes, you're not paying tax on your savings and your investments if you're savvy enough to put them in an ISA. And the £20,000 a year ISA limit is extremely generous. It's far more generous than it used to be. And it's way, way, way above what most people could ever hope to manage to save or invest in a year. But the people who can do that do pay an awful lot of tax on their earnings. And we had this argument with the whole chopping of the 45p tax rate, the removal of that, which then came back with a vengeance and bit people at a lower level after the sort of mini budget chaos unfolded. But when you then look at the amount of money, like the actual sum of money that people were paying in tax in order to hit that 150 grand of income a year, it's a lot of money. And it is often, by that time you've done that, you pay more money in tax than the median wage in the country. So it's not really, I think, a correct argument to say that people who are benefiting from perks like the ISA thing, from perks like pension tax relief, from earnings like big earnings, aren't paying their way. Because actually, if you do look at the numbers and you drill down into them, they are. And it is really unfortunate there are lots of people in this country who don't have any savings. And we should do everything we possibly can to encourage them. But there is also a lot of support that goes to lower income families, lower income households, people on lower incomes, tax credits, stuff like that, for example. And you can't solve every problem. And I genuinely think the backlash that would come from chopping the ISA limit would be so great that it could never be done. And I would also add that there would be another issue here. Okay, do you do this retrospectively and apply it to everybody's savings? So people who've already got £100,000 more in an ISA now, they suddenly get whacked. It's like, nope, sorry, sunshine, your £100,000 is fine, but above that, you're now paying tax. Retrospective tax rates are not considered to be the best thing. Or do you just offer them some protection, but you say to people in the future, well, once you're, I'm sorry, but they're protected because they've already got it, but you, like, in the future, you're not going to get it, because that dramatically increases generational unfairness. And we think about generational unfairness from this perspective of, the baby boomers have got all the money and they've got these big pensions and they've got these big ISAs and they've got all this stuff. But you've got to remember that one day you might aspire to get there. And actually what we're doing is pulling the ladder up behind them. And people of the younger generation are not getting anywhere near the benefits that the older generation got. And if we did this with ISAs, that would be another classic case of that.
Helen, Simon makes some good points there. There's a few things that stick out for me. I mean, firstly, even if they did cap it, where is the guarantee that the money that they would save would be directed at helping those and strategies to help those with no savings at all? They wouldn't, is the answer to that. Also, 1.5 million is not a small number of people who've got over 100,000. And ISAs have only been around for, 23, 4 years, something like that. In a few years' time, we're probably going to have more people than that. But also, the thing that really gets me about any of these measures when it comes to capping pensions and savings is the message that it sends out. If you want to encourage people to save, not just the wealthy, but everybody, by doing things that say we're going to cap how much you're going to save, I just sense it sends out the wrong message. Personally, I'm not sure it's a positive thing for anybody.
I agree. You're right. 1.5 million people. It's a significant amount, but it's not an absolutely huge amount. But I think you're completely correct to say, this isn't just going to be. I mean, if it was to happen, which it's not likely to. It wouldn't just be unpopular with those 1.5 million people who have more than £100,000 in their ISAs. It would be unpopular with people who think that, they might one day have 100,000. Aspiration,
exactly.
Exactly. People who are saving hard and thinking, that's something to aspire to. I think, it would be a very unpopular policy with a lot of people. People, and actually we're not a great nation of savers. In this Resolution Foundation report, they found that we're actually worse at saving, and Britons have less in savings, and a lot of countries across Europe have much more in savings than us. So I think it's something that people kind of aspire to, and it's good to have savings. It's a safety net, and you're right, it's something we should completely encourage. On your point about whether this additional tax money they would make would actually go to helping people on lower income save more. There is no guarantee that they would do that. One thing that the government could do to help people who don't earn as much save is they have a scheme called Help to Save, which is actually a really good scheme. So it allows people who get certain benefits, so working tax credit and things like that, to get a bonus of 50p in the pound for their savings. They can only put in £50 a month to this account, but that's a really good deal. So if you did that for 4 years, you'd get £1,200 in bonus money. Something like improving that scheme, opening it up to more people, or allowing them to save a bit more every month would be a really good way, I think, to help people on lower incomes to get that kind of savings buffer. But I mean, do you need to massively cut tax incentives to people who save a lot more to do that? I mean, not necessarily. I think encouraging people to have a bit of a savings buffer is a really good thing. To be honest, I think it'd be worthwhile money spent by government.
I also think maybe what we need to do is encourage the people with all the ISA savings to spend some of them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we need to do to help the economy. Encourage the people who have built up hundreds of thousands of pounds in their ISAs to, instead of to keep accumulating and then, go to their grave with large ISA balances that are then passed on, to spend some of it. We talked about this with inheritance tax last week. Maybe we should encourage them to give it away. We should encourage them to give it to their dependents early.
How would you do that, Simon? What do you reckon we could do?
I don't know. But so the attitude we have is this is the problem with the whole idea of tax on aspiration, is we increasingly think of people who have built up wealth as being naughty and bad, and that they shouldn't have done it, and that it's totally unfair that they've done it. And the more you do that, the more they kind of feel a bit under attack and everything like that. And actually, we should go, hey, look, it's great that you built up this money. Now spend it, or give it away, or give it to your descendants now, or whatever. It's just change the messaging. If we can sort of switch the messaging around on that, maybe we could then get some money flowing into the economy, and then that benefits everybody.
Can't we cap it if in inheritance? couldn't that be another solution to try and get them to spend it before people pass on? Is to say, well, you can only pass a certain amount on, and I appreciate.
Well,
yeah.
we already do that.
I was going to say we already do that for a certain extent, but could we not have a cap like 50,000 you can only pass on, and the rest
you've got the 7-year rule, haven't you?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think how we can get
you'd
people to
think
spend.
that would encourage people to give money away well in advance, but maybe the 7-year rule, maybe 7 years is too long, and people are like, oh, maybe it's just it's not a great number. Maybe if you change the number or something. We talked about the inheritance tax amounts last week, and the fact that they haven't changed. You could give £3,000 away each year, and then it becomes liable for inheritance tax. £3,000 doesn't buy what £3,000 used to buy. It doesn't buy what £3,000 bought a year ago. It buys £300 less. But maybe you should change that. Maybe we should have 2 inheritance tax rates or something. It's like it's only a 10% rate on money that you give away when you're alive, but it's the higher rate on money that you give away when you're dead. I don't know. The problem is like any situation where you come up like this, people are immediately going to go, that's unfair. And the reason why that's unfair is because the people are benefiting because their family has money and they're being given money. It's not redistribution. But sometimes the most effective way of redistributing money is to get rich people to spend it, rather than to hoard it. And that's not something that is built into our thinking or our tax system.
No, indeed. Well, perhaps they could spend it on some flights, or not. Let's go there. Is this the most generous Avios deal ever? British Airways has launched a credit card with a bumper sign-up bonus that experts reckon might well be. New customers who take out the BA American Express Premium Plus card via the British Airways website will bag points worth up to 8 economy flights, or they can be converted into £467 in Nectar points. So what is the catch? Before we get to that, though, I feel like we need to mention the airline wars that are going on for This Is Money. I don't know if you remember. It was only a couple of weeks ago. Might have been last week. I can't remember. I was on a Wizz Air flight, and the pilot came out on Christmas Day to say he was a big fan of the pod, and I was rather surprised and humbled by that. To which Dave got in contact. Hello, Georgie, long-time listener here. I just heard the latest This Is Money podcast. I'm a pilot at British Airways. Just to let you know, there are lots of us at BA who listen. Hope to catch you on a flight one day. Marvellous. EasyJet, step up your game, please. But thank you very much to Dave. Thank you very much to everybody at BA for listening. Let's talk about British Airways. By chance, by the way, this is not the reason why we're doing this story. Helen, marvellous. British Airways, eh? Avios points, though. People go absolutely mad for them. Like, what is so good about Avios points? I've checked and I've got 14,261. How am I doing? Nope, Simon slightly raised your eyebrows there. Is that good? Can I do anything with it?
I have no idea. I'm not an Avios points collector. I do have an American Express card.
Dave the pilot?
The Avios points.
Any ideas?
I have earned Avios points. I've never spent any of the Avios points. It is a massive false economy, especially because I have it set up so that I obviously make at least the minimum payment every month, but not set up so that the full amount goes out of my bank account. On a number of occasions, I've forgotten to pay it off. Don't do this, people. And then I've cost myself more in interest than I'll ever gain in the Avios points. So yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask, but there are lots of people who do really like them. And actually they were a real bonus when people for people who travel for work, especially if they travel long haul. Right. They can pick up loads and loads of points, and often their company will book their flights, but they can claim the points themselves. And that means that they can then start using the points for their own holidays, for their own families and things like that. Clearly that has been heavily impacted by the restrictions on flights and travel over COVID. And then the fact that, although holidaymaker air travel has pretty much bounced back to the same level, business travel is still considerably down. So you can see why there might be some more generous offers going, hey guys, remember these? Yeah.
I mean, the problem for me with this is, Helen, I've only really travelled by British Airways that I can remember once recently. Sorry, Dave, the pilot. Maybe that'll change. And American Express, anytime I've seen anyone try and use it, they can't. So, there's the catch, no?
Yeah, that's right. It is slightly inconvenient in a lot of places to be using a Amex card. I think the thing that's good about Avios, and this is only if you travel a lot. If you only go on holiday once a year, collecting Avios points probably not worth it. I was getting a new credit card recently, and a lot of the ones I was looking at had good sort of Avios offers. I went for one with decent cashback instead, because for me, the Avios points, it's just not enough of a perk for me. But for people who do fly a lot, they go absolutely mad for Avios points. And the thing that's so good about them is, my understanding is that basically the Avios points are worth much more than the money you've spent to get them. So you're basically getting quite heavily discounted flights if you look at it in terms of the money you've spent on your card to get those points. It's quite a good deal for people who fly a lot.
Yeah. And just taking a look at this particular one, 70,000 points, Helen, which sort of makes my 14,261 look pretty rubbish, and that's just for signing up. So clearly I'm not doing, is it Sainsbury's you can get Nectar points for Avios and stuff? I'm not travelling or food shopping enough. 70,000 though, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. And they've said that could be up to 8 economy class flights. Don't know. I mean, that would have to be cheap flights, I think, to get 8 in there, but it is pretty decent. So if you had 35,000 points, that could get you a off-peak business class return from London to places like Milan, Amsterdam, Geneva. So you're getting, maybe a couple of business class return flights, or perhaps more if you go for economy flights. It's a decent bonus, and actually it's much more than is typically offered when you take out this kind of card. So typically when you take out an Amex, the standard offer is 25,000 Avios points. So you're getting triple that on this deal. Even when they've had bonuses on before, it's normally put up to 35,000 or 40,000. So it is much more than the regular bonus. It's a decent deal, but there are catches with this card. So having the card costs £250 a year to hold the card. Yeah, which is a lot. It's 28.1% APR on purchases. And obviously, as with any credit card, you need to make sure you pay it off to avoid getting stung with any fees. You also need to spend £3,000 on the card within the first 3 months to get that bonus. So there are quite a lot of hoops you need to jump through if you want to get those bumper 70,000 Avios points.
In sum, Helen, the survey says worth it.
I mean,
if you like it, if you're going to use it, and if you're going to tick all the boxes,
if you're going to take out the card, and if you're going to take out a credit card anyway and probably spend $3,000 on it in 3 months, and you were willing to take out a card with fees, then yeah, it's worth it. But don't take it out just for the points if it wasn't a card that you would use regularly anyway. As with any of these deals, if you wouldn't have taken it out anyway, probably don't, just for the points.
That's it for part 1.
I'm joined now by Sam North from eToro for our weekly look at what's been going on the markets. Sam, how's the past week been?
Yeah, when we look back at this week, in a few months' time, it won't be remembered, for the rest of the year. But after a strong start to, the last couple of weeks, we've kind of been pulled in our tracks now. The market's pulled back a little bit. However, it is worth noting that everything is still rather contained. There's arguments for the market going higher from here, but there's also arguments that it could go lower. So until we get a little bit more clarity, I think this market might lack a little bit of direction. This week, we saw the Bank of Japan kick things down the road, kick the can down the road. Netflix saw a positive earning reaction, and we saw inflation in the UK come lower again, which for the people in the UK is what you want to see. However, I think one of the main talking points is that we've seen further cuts in the tech industry. Microsoft and Google have announced layoffs this week. Ultimately, tech layoffs aren't really a shock. We've expected it for quite some time, but it will be worth keeping an eye on whether it filters through to the broader market. So whilst tech is a big player financially, I think it's only about 3-4% of the total workforce. So it's not that big, but worth keeping an eye on.
And what do we have on the cards next week?
Well, we've now entered what's known as the blackout period before the Federal Reserve meeting. So we won't get any comments from central bankers, which is probably music to a lot of people's ears. So that meeting is until the 2nd of February. So I wouldn't really expect too much in the way of fireworks next week and volatility. But we do have US GDP, so that is worth keeping an eye on, although it's not expected to be too bad. If we are to get real big moves in the markets, I'd imagine it comes because of the earnings that we've got coming out. We've got Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, Tesla, Boeing, Visa, MasterCard, Chevron, and American Express, just to name a few. So it's really starting to pick up with some of those big tech companies, energy companies, and payment-related companies too. So it's starting to get a little bit more juicy on the earnings front. Other data points for those that are interested, you've got global PMIs and a Bank of Canada rate decision. But I would probably be focusing mostly on those earnings. And then if the GDP is wildly out of line, then maybe we do get some big market moves.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. We'll speak to you next week.
Thank you, Simon.
Welcome back. Now, a sad Crane on the Case story this week, following on from last week's pod. Your reader, Helen, was sadly told that he only has months to live. He wants to cash in his pension pot in order to get married. But he ran into some problems accessing the money which is held with Scottish widows. Sad story, Helen. Take it up.
Sure. So you're right. This is a really, really upsetting story. Also a story that made me really angry because I think Scottish widows have acted terribly here. So this person, he took out a Scottish widow's pension back in the 1980s, left it to mature. September last year, they contacted him to update him on the pension pot, and he was told that it was worth £17,300. Sadly, he is suffering from terminal illness. So this pension pot was good news for him. It meant that would help him sort out some sort of financial affairs, and he also wanted to get married to his partner, who he'd been together with for 15 years. So he kind of thought, great, this will help me to do those things, and he sort of started the ball rolling on claiming that money. So there are rules with pension pots that if you can prove that you're terminally ill, you can usually access your money before you'd normally be able to. So he's trying to claim in that way, and basically this just kicked off an absolute admin nightmare. So clearly he was sort of in and out of hospital with various sort of things related to his illness, and which meant that he wasn't able to fill out the forms that Scottish widows sent him in order to claim his pension within 5 days, which is apparently their time limit for doing so. So he got out of hospital, called Scottish Widows, said where we're at, and they said, oh, well, you didn't actually file the forms within 5 days. So that caused a massive delay in claiming this money. This widow, unfortunately, only has a few months to live. So the fact that no one at Scottish Widows kind of picked this up and thought this is something that needs to be dealt with efficiently and quickly and with compassion, it kind of astounds me. There were other problems as well. So at one point, he was told that he actually couldn't have any money. He was sent a letter saying that the pension had no surrender value. So he, for a long while, thought that he wasn't getting any money. This meant that he needed to downgrade his wedding, sadly, and have less guests than he wanted to, and kind of do it on a budget, which is really sad. The upshot of it all, he kind of contacted me back in November and said, look, am I really not entitled to this money? He was, he'd been back and forth with them for months and months and asked for my help. When I got in touch, they told me that he was, in fact, entitled to the money. He'd accidentally filled out a form wrong, which had made them say to him that he basically wasn't. They got it wrong. And the 5-day limit is a thing, apparently, but they said that they should have sort of got the forms back and forth to him much quicker, which I did apologise for. So they paid him his money, and then I went to them to ask, I think quite rightly, for some compensation. This caused him huge amounts of stress in the final months of his life. The amount that they came back with initially, £200.
No.
£200, which I think is absolutely nowhere near enough. And I think when this article went online as well, a lot of readers clearly agree with me, is that that's absolutely outrageous. I mean, that's absolute drop in the ocean. So I went back to them and said, come on, I think you really need to offer a bit more. And then they upped it by £50, which is honestly outrageous. You know, this is a huge company. Scottish Widows are owned by Lloyds. They not only should they have much better process in place to deal with this, when they get it wrong, they really should pay out what people deserve. I think it's really sad. And unfortunately, I left it, me and the readers sort of decided that clearly it wasn't enough in his opinion and in my opinion, but he decided he didn't want to waste any more time going back and forth with Scottish Widows. So he decided that it's going to take his £250 and leave it at that. But I honestly think it's absolutely outrageous.
There's some stories you hear and then you just think, goosebumps. That is despicable from Scottish Widows. How much does, and I ask this to anyone who was involved in this process at Scottish Widows, how much would you value your final months? How much is it worth? I'm really angry about this, Helen. I think that is absolutely, utterly, utterly appalling. I don't know what value you can put on that time that person wanted that money for an unbelievably good reason. I mean, not that anybody wanting money for any reason, it's your money, but I'm honestly, Simon, I'm angry. Take it up before I get upset.
I share your view. When I read this, when Helen filed her column this week, I was just like, that's just 200 quid, 250 quid in the end. I was like, that is shocking. You know, when you consider all of the things that have happened and a 5-day window. I mean, that's just madness. I mean, especially because it's worth noting that often companies don't actually send things out first class, so they take ages to arrive. I don't know whether that was the case in this situation anyway, but I think that's absolutely terrible. And, you know, just to be clear, Scottish Widows is part of Lloyds Banking Group. Lloyds Banking Group is absolutely huge. Lloyds Banking Group also makes quite a lot of money. I'm looking now at Lloyds' 2022 half-year results, okay? Statutory profit after tax, £2.8 billion. And Scottish Widows, part of that organisation, saw fit to offer someone whose dying wish was to get their pension and spend their money on having a wedding, 200 quid in compensation for a scenario where you just can't see how it's this poor person's fault. And then they upped it to 250 quid when Helen said, I think maybe you might need to offer them a bit more. That's pretty poor.
They may as well just not bother with that. It's an insult.
Just leave it at that, you know. And if anybody from Scottish Widows is listening, maybe have a word with someone and see if you can do a little bit better for this poor person.
Yeah. And for every person that you come into contact with in this manner, have some staff training, have something, because this is, honestly, I'm beside myself, Helen. I'm beside myself. Right, I need to change the tone of the podcast and cheer myself up. So we're going to talk about the cold weather. Not normally a cheery subject, but desperately looking for ways to cut back on a record heating cost that we are. The age-old advice, just put on another layer. But how much, one wonders, can the humble jumper actually save you? Well, being the hard-hitting investigative journalist that you are at This Is Money, the team have attempted to work it out. So when Granny does just say, put on another jumper, you can say, well, actually, Simon, what can you say?
You can say that, depending on circumstances, it will genuinely save you some money. And actually, at the top end of this, it will genuinely save you quite a lot of money.
Right.
The gains will decrease at certain points. So, to explain, and I would just like to point out that this is not the world's most scientific test, okay? So,
right, yeah.
But our man, Sam Barker, took one for the team and volunteered to turn his heating down put some extra clothes on.
Right.
What happened? Well, basically, our experiment shows that you could actually, the average household could save about £250 a year to £300. Okay. To work this out, we had a few parameters. Firstly, we assume that someone feels warm enough at a room temperature of around 18 degrees Celsius and starts feeling cold slightly below that level. Now, this will vary. Okay, we all start feeling warm or cold at different temperatures. It depends on your own sort of general body temperature vibe, your age, your sex, all those kinds of things, right? Okay, but let's just go. We'll go for this 18 degrees thing. Now, lots of people set their thermostats considerably above 18 degrees. It's the recommended winter room temperature by the World Health Organization. The Energy Saving Trust recommends rooms should ideally be 18 to 21. During cold weather, government advice has been to heat rooms to at least 18 degrees C for health reasons, especially for elderly people. There's a real concern about people just turning off the heating and sitting in the cold and then making themselves ill, and also causing, increasing problems of damp and mold and stuff like that. But about 17 million homes in the UK, it's reckoned, set their thermostat above 20 degrees Celsius. So that means that there's lots of people who have it on too high. So what can you do about this? We can turn it down, but if you turn it down, you need to obviously put some more clothes on. So if you sit in a 17 degree room wearing only shorts and t-shirt, you're going to get cold. But once you start adding clothes, that's going to minimize this. So Sam basically found out how much warmth is generated by using a thermometer, and he discovered that a light jumper increased your temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. So if you're in a 15 degrees Celsius room, your room now feels like 17 degrees Celsius, getting close to the target temperature of 18 degrees. Wear your t-shirt with a thicker woolen jumper on. That added 4 degrees Celsius to the wearer's temperature. He's taking his own temperature here, just to be clear. Maybe I didn't explain that properly. And
in the mouth or under the
warm.
armpit, or does it make a difference?
With a proper thermometer, a medical thermometer.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. So, presumably under the armpit nowadays, most of those thermometers do, don't they?
Well, yeah. Was there a certain type of fabric, a shop? I was wondering, if it's a super expensive jumper, does that make a difference? Or a cashmere, maybe?
Just a thick wool jumper.
Right, okay.
And then obviously, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, because I don't think we need to explain to the listeners of the podcast how to get dressed. I think many of them will have nailed that life skill. But from personal experience, that if you sit there in a room and it's quite chilly, I'm quite chilly in this room now. The room that I am in, I'm at home recording this. The room that I am in is at the front of the house. Okay, and it's luckily our garden is southwest facing, so it's lovely. It's sunny. The front of the house is a bit of a frost pocket, so it gets cold in here. I'm wearing jeans, t-shirt, jumper, socks, and I have my slippers on. Right? If I was to sit in here and I'm just about warm enough, I could probably be a bit warmer. If I was to put a body warmer on, or a gilet, as everyone calls them nowadays, I would be plenty warm enough. Okay, so that's just one item of extra clothing without needing to go and turn the heating on. The heating is not on at the moment, right? Likewise, if I was sitting in here with a thinner jumper on, I wouldn't be warm enough. Or if the thing that I always make the mistake of doing when I'm at home is sitting around with no socks or shoes on. So, and that does get you to feel cold when you've got bare feet and stuff like that. So it's blindingly obvious, right? That if you put some more clothes on, it will help. But it does actually stand the test of raising your temperature, which means theoretically you can turn the thermostat down a bit. Now, this is only going to really pay off if you're dialing that temperature thermostat down from, the top end, 21 degrees C or higher, down to that kind of 18 degrees C or even 17 degrees C or something. Once you start going below that, it's not really going to make any difference or as much difference whatsoever. So the higher you set your thermostat in the first place, the more you have to gain from turning it down, to state the bleeding obvious again.
Right. Enjoyed that, Simon, I have to say. That was investigative journalism. at its finest. Finally, the story of how Dave Fishwick became a self-made millionaire and set up a community bank in Burnley debuted on Netflix this week. Our Simon caught up with the man himself, longtime friend and small business columnist for This Is Money.
I'm joined now by Dave Fishwick, the star of Bank of Dave, originally a TV series, a book, documentaries, and now a film on Netflix about his life starring Rory Kinnear, and of course, This Is Money's small business doctor. Dave, it's been quite a week, hasn't it, for you? What's the reaction to the film been like?
Simon, hello. It's wonderful to see you again. Do you know, I've never seen anything like it that I've been involved with before. It's just come from out the blue and I could burst. It's so exciting. I've been on everything. ITV, BBC One, International News, CNBC. I'm even in Hello magazine, you know. And it's just incredible, especially because Netflix have really given such a push. I mean, we're number 2 within 24 hours of the movie going online. We're number 2 on the Netflix charts. It's just mind-blowing.
So I was going to ask you what it feels like to see yourself portrayed on screen. But I guess also there's the question along with that of what does it feel like to switch on Netflix for the evening to sit down and watch something and it's trying to punt a movie about your own life at you?
Well, you know what? I watch myself on telly and I don't like that. You know, you look at myself and I think, oh, I look terrible, or I look fat, or I could do with some more hair, you know. But to watch somebody play you on a movie, that's just another level. And I remember first time I met Rory, he come up to the house here and he knocked on the door and he says, I opened it and there he was, Rory Kinnear at a Bond. And he said, Dave, meet Dave. And I thought, do you know what? He looks more like me than I do. I thought, he'll do for me. And he did a brilliant job.
If you've sat there, watched the movie, been to the premiere, you've done all these other things, and you've got all these people watching it, do you think that also beyond the fact, you know, this is nice for people to watch, it's a great story, that it actually helps people get their head a little bit around finance and business and those things that lots of people don't really like to think about too much?
Do you know what I'd love to do, Simon? I think what would be really cool together, what we should do is we could do something on things like APR, the annual percentage rate. And when I talk to people, I said to them, look, you know, you're going to get a loan about things. What you need to do is look at the loan. It's across 3 years. It might be for £3,000 or £4,000. Divide it across the 3 years. The interest will be included in that. And then you can look at what it's going to cost you at the end, rather than looking at numbers and things. And I think what we need to do is we need to teach in schools, in colleges and universities, we need to teach kids about loans, because the problem is the payday loan industry is horrendous. I did a series on it called The Loan Ranger. We were very lucky. We won a Royal Tillman Society Award for it. And I got Wonga closed down. They were charging 5,500% APR, which is just criminal. I dislike the payday loan industry with a passion, but we just need to teach kids and young people about credit cards, about APRs, about loans. And it'd be really good to do something with you on this show.
And I mean, that is definitely a problem that you encounter with, you know, sometimes people spend, you know, they go into the shops, they're offered something that's a 30% discount, 40% discount. And we don't teach people enough about financial education because there are people out there who just, they don't really understand what that 30 or 40% discount means, let alone coming to the point where it's then like, okay, hang on a minute, think about whether this ever really was the full price or why are they discounting it and things like that. So popular stories like yours help to put a perspective on it. How important is the story also of, you know, how you built up your business and how you became a successful businessman, do you think?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I started less school, absolutely useless, Simon, as you know. I was 16 years old. I didn't have a single qualification to my name. And the teachers all thought I was going to be some sort of loser. But the thing is, I just got lost within school. I got bullied. I had loads of problems in it. And I just got left behind. So I ended up on a building site. I was 16 years old. I was a builder's labourer on £27.50 a week. But it's not where you start, it's where you finish that matters. And I've gone from builder's labourer to building the first new high street bank for 120 years in Britain. And if I can do it, a lad from Burnley with no qualifications that sells buses, then anybody can.
It's been a tough year over the past 12 months for lots of people, individuals and businesses. And 2023, no hiding, it's going to be a tough one as well. Do you think that politicians and the Bank of England really understand what's going on in the real economy from what you see?
I'd love to see a net for people to fall onto that bounces them back up into society. We do need to help the ones that are having it toughest. You know, those with plenty of money will get through it. But the people at the other end of the scale that's really struggling paying the gas bill or working out whether they're going to feed the 4-year-old daughter or themselves, you know, they're the ones we really need to help. I'd like to really see communication skills taught in schools and really push for communication skills, because if you can teach the communication skill, I think you can improve somebody's chances in life by a further 50%. You can really make yourself with 50% more in life just by learning to communicate, learning to do better deals, learning to get that job you want, learning to push forwards, learning to put one foot in front of the other and really push every day hard. That's what I'd like to see. Now, we've talked about maths and things with Rishi. He's going to do an extra 3 years maths. I don't think maths would have done me a great deal of good. I think it'll help some people, but I think communicating with people and learning to communicate will help people an awful lot more than that. Help people to push themselves forward.
So arguably, if we want to increase social mobility, which is what one of the things behind this, we need to do more of the basics. It's not the complicated stuff. It's actually just teaching people the basics better.
Yeah, I get kids coming up to Burnley Library from universities to learn about business. And I've not got any degree in business. I've not even got a CSE in anything. But I've built 6 multi-million-pound businesses here and in America, and I've built them from scratch. And it's a little bit like sometimes some of the teachers, and I think teachers do a great job, so I'm not knocking teachers, but the problem is kids and young people go to college and university to learn about business. But the problem is the person teaching them's never actually run a business. And that's the problem. And a lot of the politicians haven't either. So it's a bit like getting on an aeroplane with a guy that's read all the books and watched all the DVDs, Simon, but he's not actually took off. So when these young people come up to Burnley Library and have a class with me, they ask questions about real business and I can answer them. You know, I've been involved in properties, in sales, in car sales, vehicle sales, renting things out. I've got a massive investment company in America. Right across the scale, we're involved in media and all sorts of things. So we've got a broad sense and we can teach what we've actually been involved in. And it'd be good to get some teachers out there that've actually done the job of running businesses and perhaps some politicians as well.
You're sharing that advice with our readers on This Is Money and on Mail Online through your Small Business Doctor column that you do for us. Now, we get lots of questions from people that hinge around a similar thing, which is, I want to start a business, but I'm a bit worried. Is it the right time? You know, it's taking that leap, clearing that first hurdle. We've got warnings that we're going into a recession, or we might already be in one. Who knows, you know, what's going to end up there. But is this a bad time to start a business, or is it always a good time to get started?
Do you know what, Simon? I don't think there's a perfect time ever. It's usually down to personal circumstances. If you've got a little bit of money spare, so you've got some just in case, my advice would be get a part-time job as well, either at night or at weekends or whatever, preferably in the business that you're looking at starting. So, for instance, if you want to start a pub or something, or you want a little cafe or a restaurant, get a job in a pub locally to yourself. Find out what they sell best, what food sells best, what beers sell best, what furniture are they using. The decor will have been done by some really, really professional guy, and it will cost a fortune to design. Just borrow the best ideas. What nights work best with singers and things. So get yourself a small job or a part-time job in the industry you're thinking about. You'll make you a little bit of spare money as well, and just make that step. And it doesn't have to be just a small business, Simon. It can be, you might want a job, or you might want that way up the ladder in the job that you're in, or you're looking for a promotion. Tomorrow morning, I want everybody that's watching and listening to this to think, right, what's my dream? Right. Dave said, let's make it happen. So get yourself one foot in front of the other, go up to the boss and say, I'm looking for that promotion. I want that job. Or just start that business. I've started 6 over the last 30-odd years, and they've been in tons of recessions and tons of problems and everything that's happened in the world with geopolitics and everything, and each one of those 6 has worked. So there isn't ever a perfect time. But my advice is put one foot in front of the other, and tomorrow morning, make it happen.
That's great advice, Dave. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. It's been wonderful to speak to you, and I look forward to hearing the news that you've hit the #1 spot on Netflix.
We're on it
next week. Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Sam.
Good to speak to you. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
All the very best.
Bye.
Simon with Dave Fishwick there. It is out now on Netflix. That's it for this week. You can keep up to date with all the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app. And if you have any comments or questions for the team or anything you'd like them to look into, Simon?
You can email us at editor@thisismoney.co.uk. You can tweet us at thisismoney. You can come to thisismoney.co.uk/podcast to join the debate in reader comments.
And if you like our podcast, why not rate us wherever you found us? It helps other people find us too.
Market updates and conversations around the financial world don't have to be boring. The Digest and Invest podcast by eToro is a great way to tune into what's happening in a fun and easily digestible format. Discover the Digest and Invest podcast at etoro.com/academy/podcasts.